The common myth is that most of those governments wanted to fight wars. Every government says it was a matter of life and death. We had to do it. And if we didn't do it, we would all get destroyed by the evil enemies. But they all did it at the same time. And they all went off the gold standard. They all increased the money supply massively. And in fact, there was a lot less public support for this war than most history books would like to tell you. And in fact, the most interesting story for me is the story of Britain, how Britain joined the war, because Britain at that time had the Bank of England, which was the world's central bank. It was really the world's first central bank at that time, because the whole world used to deal with the Bank of England. And it was the world's reserve currency. It was like the dollar today. So why did Britain get into war? Why did Britain sacrifice its position as the world leader, militarily and economically and in its empire, in order to go fight a war on the European mainland against its very, very powerful enemies and allies? Why would it get involved in this? It's a very interesting question. And if you look at it, you'll see that it was actually very different from the story that is usually told. So, usually, you know, historians like to say, well, Britain's hand was forced because of the invasion of Belgium and they had guaranteed Belgian neutrality. None of that is true. In reality, Britain wanted to fight the war. In reality, the King of Britain wanted to fight the war, and he spent years getting into a secret alliance with France and Russia in order to convince them to attack Germany so that Britain would enter Germany. And in fact, they deliberately lied repeatedly in order to make this happen. They denied that there was a secret alliance in order to make it happen, and in order to make it so that Germany would not think that Britain would enter the war, thus Germany would enter the war. So they lied about the causes of war, and then most importantly, they lied about the financing of the war. In fact, to get just how incredibly unlikely the war was, when the Crown Prince of Austria was assassinated in Serbia in 1914, on the same day in which he was assassinated, the British and German navies were partying together in Kiel, in the north of Germany, where there was a week celebration where the Kaiser of Germany attended, and the British Navy attended, and the two soldiers of both navies were partying together over that night when the news of the assassination came, and then the celebrations ended. And when they left, the King of Britain, King George at that time, left a message to the people of Germany saying, friends today, friends in future, friends forever. This was June 28, 1914. Within 5 weeks, those two navies were at war with each other. How did this happen? It's an incredible story. In fact, for 4 weeks after the assassination was not even discussed in the British Parliament. It was considered a completely inconsequential matter of Europeans fighting with one another, had nothing to do with the British. And then within 1 week, Britain was in war. The British Prime Minister did not expect that he could ever be dragged into war. But that's exactly what happened. And in fact, when more recently we've seen some of the documents come out, it's very clear that the British were setting it up as a trap. In fact, the King of Britain was trying everything to make that war happen without the British people finding out. But how could he pull it off? How could he manage to do that without a vote in Parliament, without the people agreeing with it? Well, it's because he had the money printer. And this is what actually happened. In 1914, there was a bank run on the Bank of England, and the Bank of England only had 31% of the gold it needed to back its currency. People started asking for their money. The bank didn't have enough money. So what did they do? Run the money printer. 300 million pounds were printed in August of 1914. And then, as the money supply increased, they suspended the redemption of gold. They told people they can't get their gold. So basically they went off the gold standard, of course, because now they can't give them gold. And then they tried to borrow. And so they ran a bond auction. And they tried to raise 350 million pounds for that bond auction, which was 55% of the public debt. So imagine the public debt going up 55% over a war. It was a huge bond sale, and with an attractive interest rate. And they thought, of course, the British people are going to buy it, but to their eternal credit, the people of Britain actually did not buy it. In fact, less than a third of the bonds were sold, and fewer than 100,000 investors in all of Britain, out of a population of 46 million, fewer than 100,000 people invested in those bonds to fund World War I. But the army was already at war. So what do? People don't want to pay for the war, but you've already sent the army to war. You hate when that happens, right? It really sucks. I know, happens to the best of us. But don't worry, there's a way to fix this. What is it? Fiat, of course. Fiat fixes this. If you ever find yourself in a war with no money, don't worry, Fiat fixes this. Just run the money printer. And in fact, what they did back then was truly astounding, because the Bank of England just extended a credit line to 2 of its employees who went and bought the bonds with their own bank accounts. They went and bought roughly 2/3 of the bond issue to fund British entry into World War I was bought by 2 guys. They printed a ton of hundreds of millions of pounds to them, more than the public debt of all Britain, and they used it to buy the bonds that made the war possible in 1914. And the next day, the Financial Times, the original shitcoin promotional telegram group of its time, published same thing, same shit they do today, promoting all of the central bank propaganda and all of the central bank shitcoins and scams. They said it was oversubscribed, 250 million pounds more than what the government wanted to raise. People have bought these bonds with so much enthusiasm. We're going to war. Everything is great. That's what the Financial Times published. And then, of course, this only was found out in 2017. 103 years later, some people were digging around in the attic of the Bank of England, and they found a detailed study that's confidential, that was prepared in the 1920s, detailing everything that the Bank of England did during 1914, and it became clear that, in fact, the bond was not oversubscribed. And the Financial Times ran a correction 103 years later. They ran a retraction. You can see it in 2017.